When did your "something is very wrong here" feeling turned out to be true? I was 22 and working as a delivery driver for this local pizza place. The job was pretty straightforward. Take orders, drive around town, collect tips, go home. Nothing crazy ever happened. Until I got this delivery to 1247 Oak Street on a Thursday night around 9 p.m. The house looked normal from the outside. Two-story colonial, well-maintained lawn, porch light on. I grabbed the 3 large pizzas and walked up to the front door. That's when things started feeling off. First weird thing. I could hear what sounded like a lot of people inside, but all the windows were covered with heavy curtains. Not just regular curtains, but like thick blankets taped over every single window I could see. I knocked on the door and this guy answered immediately like he'd been standing right there waiting. He was probably 40 years old, average height, but something about his eyes seemed really intense, almost frantic. "You're late," he said, even though I'd actually arrived 2 minutes early. "Actually, sir, I'm right on time. That'll be $38.50 for the 3 large pizzas." He handed me exact change, which was weird because most people either pay with cards or need change back. But he had the precise amount ready, like he'd been counting it out before I arrived. Here's where my gut really started screaming at me. As he took the pizzas, I could see past him into the house. There had to be at least 15 people crammed into the living room, all sitting on the floor in rows facing the same direction. They were completely silent and motionless, not talking, not moving, just staring straight ahead at something I couldn't see. It looked like they were watching TV, but I couldn't hear any sound coming from that direction. The creepiest part was that not one of them looked toward the door when it opened. Usually when you're at someone's house and the pizza arrives, a few people glance over or make comments about the food. These people acted like they couldn't even hear us talking. "Thanks," the guy said and started closing the door really quickly. But right before it shut, I heard a woman's voice from somewhere deeper in the house call out, "Help us, please!" It was barely a whisper, but I definitely heard it. The guy's face went completely white. He slammed the door shut immediately. I stood there on the porch for a minute, trying to process what I just witnessed. Everything about the situation felt wrong. The covered windows, the silent crowd of people, that desperate voice asking for help. I got back in my delivery car and called my manager Brian to report what happened. He told me to drive back to the restaurant and that he'd handle it from there, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something really bad was happening in that house. So instead of going straight back, I parked around the corner and called the police. I told the dispatcher about the weird setup, the covered windows, and especially about the woman calling for help. She took down all the details and said they'd send officers to check it out. I waited in my car for about 20 minutes until I saw 2 patrol cars pull up to the house. From my spot around the corner, I could see the officers knocking on the door. At first, no one answered. Then the same guy who took the pizza came out and I could see him talking to the cops on the front porch. He seemed to be explaining something, gesturing with his hands like he was trying to convince them everything was normal, but the officers weren't buying it. One of them pointed toward the covered windows and I saw them asking to come inside. The guy kept shaking his head and stepping in front of the door like he was blocking them. That's when more police cars showed up, then an ambulance, then what looked like some kind of federal agents in unmarked cars. Turns out I had stumbled onto a major human trafficking operation. The guy running it had been holding 17 people against their will, mostly young women who'd been promised jobs in the city but ended up trapped in that house. They were being forced to work in online scams, calling elderly people and tricking them out of their retirement money. The reason they were all sitting silently in rows was because they were on phone calls with victims, reading from scripts. The covered windows were to prevent neighbors from seeing inside and to keep the victims from knowing exactly where they were located. The woman who called for help was named Lisa, and she'd been trapped there for 8 months. She later told police that they had been planning to move everyone to a different location the next morning. So my delivery that night was probably their last chance for someone to notice something was wrong. All 17 victims were rescued that night. The guy who answered the door, his name was Marcus, got 15 years in federal prison for human trafficking and fraud. The police detective told me that if I hadn't trusted my instincts and called it in, those people might have disappeared forever. Lisa sent me a letter a few months later thanking me for paying attention to the details that seemed off. She said most delivery drivers would have just taken the money and left without thinking twice about what they'd seen. Sometimes you just have to trust that gut feeling when something doesn't feel right, even if you can't put your finger on exactly what's wrong.